Welcome to our first episode of Northshore Prep Reports Weekly show. We got co-host here, Cass Hargis. Good to have Cass with us this week.
Yeah, fired up to be here. This is a great place for it. Game Day Cuts over here in Madisonville. Great place. We got a great setup. We got a great show.
Yeah, we're excited. We got a great lineup today. We got Coach Boomer Nunez from St. Thomas Aquinas, head football coach and head baseball coach there. We've got Coach Brent Indest at Lakeshore High School. We've got Coach Greg Salter, head football coach of Covington High School, and we also have Coach Steve Soper, head football coach of Hannon. So we've got
That's my favorite coach.
we got a slew lined up today. So we'll bring Coach Nunez on here in a second. Boomer, quick recap of kind of the season so far. One thing that I've been really impressed with is just the amount of talent that's on the North Shore that really, and I can admit this, I wasn't really aware of, and not just the player wise, but coaches, communities, fan bases, schools that do a great job, administrative support. It takes that whole group, right?
It does, and I think that's what makes it even more special is that there's the communities of the school, whether it's private school, public schools, but the backing that they get from the parents, the fans, and the people that are invested in the school, it makes Friday nights special, and it makes all the athletics events special, but especially Friday nights.
All right, so we're pleased to have Coach Brent Indest with us, head football coach at Lakeshore. Lakeshore's on a bit of a roll right now, ranked in top 10 and doing their thing here in District 7 4A. Coach, welcome to the stage. We appreciate you joining the show today. I know we get to talk a lot, and I hope you listen to a lot of things we say because we're pretty high on you guys right now. Tell us a little bit about where you guys are as a program, kind of heading into week 9.
I think we're on an upswing. We've gotten a couple of guys back that we've been missing since the Salmon game. Of course, we lost Kyle Gegenheimer, which that's something that we'll never really properly overcome. And what people don't realize is we didn't only lose him. We also lost our other receiver during spring ball. So we've lost our top 2 receivers. So we've kind of had to adjust. We've kind of had to adjust the way we attack people. A lot more double tight stuff, and a little less throwing. Although we were probably with Kyle, we were probably throwing it 12 to 15 times a game. Now we're throwing it to 7 to 10 times a game. But the one thing that's good is we can throw it when we need to.
Yeah, Kyle's different, man. I've been able to watch Kyle for some years, and one thing I say about Kyle is that the passing game doesn't really matter if Kyle's over there. He's got a shot to get the ball, and he usually comes down with it. So he's a little bit of a cheat code. Talk a little bit about your running game, Coach. One thing that I mention a lot, covering you guys is I'm so impressed, and I say this all the time. I say you guys do what you do really well, and you just have to do what you do. And I'm so impressed with how you game plan, and you just take what's given to you. It doesn't matter who has the ball. It doesn't matter what you run. You're very efficient at it. Talk a little bit about your offensive philosophy and how that works for you guys.
Well, definitely when it comes to philosophy, it all comes down to any good offensive football team is going to make you defend every blade of grass on the field. And I always say the threat of the pass is as important as the pass itself, especially play action in a run team. When you watch Army and Navy run the triple option Air Force, they're always going to keep you honest with shots down the field. Are you guys still with me? Okay, I got you.
Yep, we're here.
They're always going to keep you honest. Okay, they're always going to keep you honest with shots down the field. And a perfect example of that this past Friday, we noticed mid-third quarter that LaRange's safeties, their eyes were bad, and they were peeking inside, and they weren't covering Spencer Seibert. And we just picked up and just threw him an easy touchdown pass. And I did it honestly at a point in the game where I didn't need to. But I want to let the people know next week that you're going to be good. And they better not be cheating backfield because we're going to take advantage of it. And so that's the number one is not only being able to run the ball, but letting people know that if they stick their nose where it's not supposed to belong, that we're going to take advantage of that. The other thing is just being really solid up front. And I've got 2 really great offensive line coaches and some really good players up there. For 4A ball, we're not going to scare anybody getting off the bus. But
Right.
we've got several, we've got one real big guy, but then the rest of our guys, they're that, 5'10", 220-pound range guys. Some of them more close to 200, but they play with a low pad level. They get after you, and we're gonna move people, and that helps when it comes in the run game. And then lastly, again, like you said, a lot of times during the week, I'll really expect something from a defense. Like, perfect example, against LaRanger, we expected an odd front. So there were some things that I put in that we really like against an odd front. Well, they came out an even front. So you just have to adjust. And what that did was, it just made us run some different plays. And what it evolved into, we ended up having 9 different guys run the football Friday night. And that works out well for us, because that means we're not overloading Brody Loudermilk like we did against Franklinton, and we're keeping guys fresh. Because what we've had to evolve into is we've got several guys that play defense that all share spots on offense.
Right.
And because we're running out of guys due to injury, and just running out of skill guys. We've got 3 or 4 guys that play wing. We've got 3 or 4 guys that play halfback. And we've just got to utilize all of them. And I can't be worried about who's in the game when I'm running a certain play. I got to trust them to give them the ball, and they're pretty much taking care of business relative to that.
Well, and I think that's the thing that I'm impressed with you guys more than anything. You call plays based on what you're given look wise, and it doesn't matter who's in there. And you guys, you do it really well. So it's really impressive. One more question for me, and I'll let Cass go here. But I got to see it firsthand. Your run game and Brody. You went a little horizontal on us in the Northlake game, and then realized that middle was a little soft, and I felt like you ran quarterback power 273 times on us there in the second half, and it worked well.
Yeah, like I said, we're going to take what you give us. When I went into the Franklinton game, I certainly didn't plan on running Brody 35 times. But I'm one of those guys, and I think it goes along. You have certain teams that lend themselves. I call them script teams. A lot of 10 and 11 personnel teams, they go out there and they're going to have their 15-play script, and they're going to go off of it and kind of see what. I have a 2-play script in my head to start. I know what I'm going to run first play, and if that play doesn't work, if we get in second and long, I know what I'm running second play. After that, it's what you're giving me. I mean, I have no.
Yeah. Looks like we got a bad connection here with Coach. Look, let's talk a little bit about Lakeshore, and we'll get into Coach Nunez here. But I think what Coach touched on and is so impressive that they do so well is they scheme it. Mm-hmm. They just take what you give them, and they don't panic. They've had a lot of injuries. I don't think people realize how many guys have been injured, but they do that really well.
They do, and they know exactly who they are. They run what they run. They run it really, really well. They execute at a high level, and they're really good at it. And it doesn't matter. Yes, the looks are going to determine the specific plays they're running, but their scheme overall on offense isn't going to change. They're going to go do it. They do it with an attitude and a toughness that embodies their coach. I think he's got his sleeveless shirt on today, like he's fired up, ready. Like that's who they are. Yeah, and they do it at such a high level. And I think it runs through the quarterback and Brody Loudermilk, and he kind of personifies what they want to do offensively and as a team.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic at it. And look, I think they're going to make another run here. They're end zone play away from doing what Franklinton did last year, right? So, for our area and the whole area, we kind of hope that Franklinton does not meet up with Lakeshore again in the playoffs. But if it happens, I wouldn't be upset.
No, it'd be worth the price of admission. That's
right. So, look, let's bring up Boomer Nunez to the show. Coach Salter will be with you here in just a second. We got Coach Salter in the background as well from Covington High School. So, Coach Nunez, can you hear us good?
Yes, I can.
All right, we're ready to rock and roll here. So, Coach, one thing I want to touch on before we get to anything is Friday night. We got to see that firsthand, kind of a scary moment with Braden Pierre, and that injury. Can you give us a little bit of update on how Braden is today and how things are going?
Yeah, he's doing great. He actually walked out the hospital Friday night, so that was a great thing. God is good. As I explained to everybody, you see that a little bit here and there. It's so rare in football, and people think that it happens all the time, but it's so rare in football. But you've seen it a couple of times, but to actually be there, being part of it, and being witness it, and having to be one of my guys, it was pretty emotional for me, and then for my guys as well. So, but he is doing fine. He walked out the hospital Friday night. I think it was more precautionary stuff that we did send him to the hospital. So the doctor even joked with me saying, "Hey, I'd probably hold him out of practice until Wednesday." Uh, but I said, absolutely not. We're going to let mom and dad make that decision. I'm not making that decision.
Yeah, well, he gave us a scare for good, man. But I'll say this, and I said it yesterday morning on another show. But kudos to the entire community at North Lake Christian and STA kind of coming together, and a lot of prayer and faith in that kid to be okay, and it worked. So a great moment. Coach, talk a little bit about your season so far. I know you guys are 0-8 in the record column, and we talked a little bit in the preseason about this, right? About kind of recreating a culture. You guys changed offenses. I like to stick to the positive stuff, and that's just who I am in the nature. I'm sure you got a lot of negatives that are in your mind, but what I'll tell you is I thought the boys had some fight early, right, in the game on Friday night against North Lake Christian. I like your numbers. Your numbers have improved tremendously just over last year, and I think that's the big step in 2A, right? Is getting numbers out there and ensuring that you got enough kids to play. So talk a little bit about where you're at, guy. I know you got Independence coming up, and then you got the new juggernaut of Prairieville, which nobody saw coming, but then in week 10. So talk about those next 2 weeks for you.
Again, the numbers are great, and we finished the year last year with 32, and we're at 70. And thankfully, the bright spot is we haven't had one kid quit this year, and we've got some tough times, but that's the bright part that I'm looking at is not one kid's quitting, not one kid's trying to get out of the disaster that we're in right now. But so that's a good thing. The hard part is that we talked about in the beginning. We don't have tackle football in our feeder schools. So when they get to us, we're trying to teach them football and trying to get them to go tackle and do things like that as 8th, 9th, and 10th graders. But we got some things in the works that's going to fix that for the future. But we going to get that back and things like that. So that's only going to help us in the future. But again, we had 12 starters out last week against North Lake. It's nothing to cry about. You can't cry over spilled milk, but those guys still go out there and play hard. They practice hard every day. You would never tell at practice that we're 0-8 or 0-7 going into that game. So that says a lot about the type of kids we have over at St. Thomas. So coming up this week is Independence. Obviously, that was our only win last year. They're
looks like we lost Coach Nunez there. Look, let's remove him from the studio here real quick. Let's talk a little bit about STA, and if he gets back on, we'll touch on baseball real quick as well with him, because I think that's an important topic. But, playing those guys, and we did talk a little bit earlier in the season, he's had multiple players playing different positions, they offensively, and I told him this going into Friday night's game, scheme-wise, I love what they do, right? They scheme it. It's a little bit of inexperience of those kids not playing it and then having a lot of kids injured. It's a tough situation.
No, it is. And, he talked about the numbers that they had out for a football team. I think when, last year he said they had 32. I think they're closer to 60. Now, and it's guys that, I know there's some baseball guys that have come up for football for the first time. There's a receiver that's a basketball player that's playing football for the first time. So not, maybe not the most ideal situation in terms of timing with all of that, but the future, I think, is definitely bright for what he's doing and what that program can look like moving forward.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's important. Boomer, it looks like we lost you there real quick, but give us a quick summary of kind of what you looked like in baseball season real quick. I know Cam Gangy, committed to Oklahoma, and Gavin Ledoux's at John Melvin. But talk about some of those other kids. I know that I'm really high on you guys heading into the spring. Give us a little preview of that.
Yeah, so we got 5 seniors, but we have 12 juniors that have all been starting since their freshman year. So we're going to be experienced. I think it's just building that mental toughness back into that program. This has been a state of our program for a long time, and they've been to state championships and won one, and so it's an honor to be part of be the head of that program. But like I said, besides those 2 guys that are already committed, we got several other players that are going to be really good players for us in that program. So really looking forward to that. But again, obviously it helps to have those juniors that will be starting again. They'll be their 3rd year starting, coming in and playing as their freshman year.
Yeah, that helps for sure.
No doubt. I got one for you, Coach. How, being the head baseball coach and the head football coach, one, what has that been like, and how do you do it?
You know, it's a question that's been asked since day one, since the end of May that I took over both of them. This is my 19th year coaching, so I've always coached both.
Yeah.
I've always went from football to right into baseball and then back into summer and football and baseball together. It's been a little bit of a adversity, so to say, but just managing both of them and then having to deal with, hey, we're ordering baseball stuff right now when I got football going on. I don't want to overlook football to get to baseball, but there's some things that you got to take care of in the background that make sure things get done. So when you show up the practice first day, you're not looking to get everything ready. So it's been a good thing. It's the bright part of it is Coach Everson that I took over for in baseball always encouraged those guys to play football. But actually having me out there going through the grind with them is going to help them want to come out and want to go through that with them, since I'm out there with them doing both sports.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's got to be probably the biggest benefit from that is now the better athletes in both sports are going to see that you can do both. If our head coach can do both, there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to do both.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. Small school problems, right? If you can't have everybody on the same page and everybody trying to play all sports, it's really difficult to be good at those small schools. Well, look, Coach, I appreciate your time on this Sunday. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate everything you do. You've supported us from day one and continue to feed us with information. You know, we're rooting for you guys and wish you the best of luck the rest of the season. You know, I know everybody's ready for baseball in Hammond, and we're ready for it too. So, you know, once this football season's over, you guys stay healthy and keep grinding, and we look forward to covering you, man.
Mike, Cass, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it.
I do.
Thank you, my man. Have a good one. All right, our next guest, we're not going to keep him waiting long because this is the man, the myth, the legend, Coach Greg Salter at Covington High.
Wrong coach Salter.
Some big shoes to fill, huh, Coach?
Yeah, but
yeah, he set you up with that one for sure.
Make him and the rest of the alumni proud, you know.
That's right. Well, look, you guys are doing a great job. You know, we've been high on you guys since preseason, since you and I have talked, you know, early in your office and every week. You know, I'll say this, and it's no surprise, and you're gonna probably say the same thing. But you've had a bit of an up and down season so far. But you sit there and you look at, you know, district standings right now. You're sitting there 6-2, and that's not a bad place to be considering, you know, where you guys have been so far. Tell me a little bit about your season so far.
Yeah, I think you know, like you said, up and down. We've been inconsistent at times. You know, we've played really well at times, and I think that's, you know, goes along with coaching high school football. You know, we're dealing with 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, and you know, I think as coaches, we all we strive for this perfection. You know, it's probably unattainable for, you know, 99 of us coaches. We'll still continue to strive for it, but yeah, you know, you'd like to. I think everybody would like to be 8-0 right now, but we're certainly happy with 6-2, and I'm proud of our guys and how they've, you know, you get to learn a lot about yourself whenever things don't go your way and you face that type of adversity. And you know, I think that's what our team is doing, and they've rallied well the last couple of weeks and put together 2 good games. You know, complimentary football in all 3 phases of the game, and hopefully we can you know, continue to push forward and continue to get better and progress as we move, you know, any of these last 2 weeks where you're jockeying for playoff position and, you know, and hopefully an opportunity week 10 maybe to play for a district championship if things fall our way.
Yeah, you know, talking about that, you know, you guys play at Ponchatoula this week, and that's, to me, you know, I don't look at the record there. It's a pretty intriguing matchup. You know, you watch Ponchatoula play, and they've got some really talented players. I think they're physical up front. You know, they've got some guys on the outside that can hurt you. You know, I'll mention Will Walker, number 2. He's a sophomore, but he's a fantastic player. Coach, going into that game, talk a little bit about your defense. I know that's something that I've been super high on so far is your defense. I think, and the reason I say that is I think you're pretty good at all 3 levels, and that's kind of rare in high school because sometimes you have to make up for things. But talk about that group as a whole and kind of what they've done for you guys this season.
Yeah, well, I think, and you hit it on the head. Going into this year, that's where our experience, was coming back, and it is. We've had, I think three of those guys on the defensive front have seen action the last 2 years. Some as freshmen. A couple of those linebackers while we moved to Marcus Scott from that DN to a linebacker spot, and then a couple of those DBs. So we're a couple deep, at each level. And as far as the experience is concerned, and you can really see the development. I mean, it's night and day. We always finish up on Saturdays and Sundays when we're doing film, and we'll take a look back at last year's game, see if there's anything we're forgetting or anything that we might be able to go back to the well on, and to see the it's night and day, the difference in some of those, especially the sophomore crew that's now juniors, and just technique and just their understanding of the game and what role they play. And I think that's where we've hung our hat this year, while our offense is, we're breaking in a new quarterback and 5 new O linemen that are getting the opportunity to start. While we have some weapons there, it's still a work in progress. And look, defensively, it's still a work in progress. And
Yeah.
but we've been most consistent there throughout the year. But I still think in all 3 phases of the game, I'm really pleased with the progress we've made.
Yeah, Cass, what you
Yeah.
got?
Well, speaking of that progress, y'all forced 6 turnovers of Hammond on Friday, but you went through a 3-week stretch where you lose 2 out of 3 to North Shore and Mandeville, and it just seems that after starting with the Slidell week, you've just gotten better and better and better. How important is it? We talk about getting teenagers to be consistent from day to day, much less week to week. How important is it for them to stay focused on the task at hand this week, knowing what could be in week 10?
Yeah, well, I mean, we try to do our best, and I think all of us coaches do this is try to play things week to week. Not look behind. That's in the past. You certainly can't look ahead in this district. While the community and everything else will, they'll focus on, games coming up in the future. You do that, you're going to be in a dogfight each and every week, no matter who you're playing, no matter what that team's record is. There's so much parity in this area, but that 2 out of 3 stretch, starting with the North Shore game, even the Fountain Blue game. We were in a dogfight with Fountain Blue.
Yeah.
Really, we were able to pull away late, and then the Mandeville game. I felt like, all 3 of those games, I felt like we were good enough to win, but we were constantly playing behind the chains in those games, first and 20s, bad snaps, wasted plays, things like that. And I don't think any of us are good enough to continuously overcome that. And but the last 2 weeks we've been ahead of the chains. We've been getting good yards on first and second, that putting ourselves in manageable situations offensively, and then again continue to play good defense. Forcing turnovers. We had 6 like you said, we had 6 turnovers Friday night on defense. We also had another turnover. We recovered a fumble for a touchdown on special teams. So it was actually 7 turnovers. And if you're doing things like that and you're staying ahead of the chains, you can continue to be balanced. We didn't have any turnovers. You can be successful, and so we'll continue to try to drill that into our kids' heads, how important those little things are, and hopefully they respond like they have the last couple of weeks, and we continue to play well.
Yeah, Coach. Look, I don't want to take up a lot of your time here on Sunday. I know what you're doing right now, but I got your stats. I got your stats already. So
anytime I talk about the Lions, I got all the time you need. So
well, look, we appreciate it. I'll say this for people that don't know, Hammond's a pretty good football team, and kudos to Coach Buckles for what he's doing over there and kind of building that thing. I think he's and I say this about a lot of you guys.
And he's a class act. Enjoy with him and against him for sure.
Yeah, he's a great leader, man, and once again, Zaylin Bennett, their running back. I'm so high on that kid. He's a good one. He hits holes hard. But Coach, get out of here. We appreciate your time, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you this week, heading into another big one for you, getting on top of that 500 record in district, right?
Yes, sir. That's the plan, and thank you guys for not only having me, but everything that y'all do, being able to get exposure to these kids, because we got some awesome young men across the North Shore, and you guys promoting them and giving them that platform and allowing people to see how special they are. We appreciate everything y'all do.
Thanks, Coach. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, Cass, we talk a lot about the area, and Coach even touched on that, right? Just the number of players and talent. And I'll say this, I get frustrated on the recruiting side a little bit from a coaching aspect and a Northshore Prep standpoint, because I just don't think the area as a whole gets enough coverage. But that being said, the landscape now has changed so much, right? Like, it's hurt not just kids from this area, but every area. You look at recruiting now, there are 30% of the kids that were signed out of high school now are getting signed. There's a lot of kids that don't have that opportunity.
No, there is. And it's bigger. It's on the national landscape. And then when you focus in just on this area, because there's talent all up and down this parish and this area. And it's really always been like that. And you go back to someone like Covington with Coach Salter, the tradition of that program and the type of players that have rolled through there, that's kind of exemplary of what's been going on in the North Shore for quite some time. But no, you're right. The lack of signing players out of high school, and that's on the college end, that's their job, that, and they have to do what they feel is best for them and their programs. And look, if we're being honest, it's probably going to be better for those guys if they go get a 20, 21-year-old out of the transfer portal as opposed to a 17 or 18-year-old. And it hurts to say, because the high school kids in the end end up, suffering, I guess, for a little bit for it, but there's other avenues that they can get to, whether it be the JUCO route or smaller college route. But the talent in this area, it seems like it's gotten better too. It's always been good, but it seems like it's gotten better.
It's crazy how good it is. And, we talk to college coaches, often. And one thing that they say is it's not just the physical maturity, right? But they don't have to preach weight room. They don't have to preach class. Everything's not new to these kids. So they come in and they're just kind of ready to play from somewhere else. And it's a huge advantage as a coach. But unfortunately, it's the unintended consequences of where we are.
Right. That's just where we are. And it could put the onus back on the high school coaches too. And the guys in this area do a great job of, making that a priority, making the weight room a priority, and give those kids the best chance possible to not just succeed in high school, but move on at the college level.
Yeah. Well, look, we've got another coach joining us this morning. We're blessed to have all four of these great men join us. Lastly, we have Coach Steve Soper of Hannon High School. Coach, appreciate you coming on and joining us here.
Oh, anytime, man. Whatever gets me out of duties on Sundays from the house, I'm happy to step for a few minutes, But no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Taking the time to talk a little Hannon football today.
Yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir for us, Coach. We understand your message fully there. Coach, I've got district standings up here, and you guys sit at 3-5 and 0-2 in district. You've been outscored by 7 points this year. You're almost 500 in points scored against points against, right? I know that you're not happy about the record. I could easily see you guys at 6-2, and here you've had some close ones that didn't come close. But one thing that I want to say is I've been extremely impressed with what you've done as a program as a whole. These things aren't easy to do, but you built numbers up. You guys have played really well this year against some really good football teams, and I guess kind of still learning to win, right?
Without a doubt, and it's kind of, it's one of those things. I think this, last year we were a 1-8 team. This year right now we're 3-5, and this year I think has been kind of especially harder than last year, just because of the fact that we're in games at the end. So that's really the frustrating thing than anything. And it's one of those things, again, my soundboard is always my wife getting home and I'm griping about stuff. And, the comment is always, is it better than it was? Yes, it is. So like I said, the progress is there. It's, I tell people this all the time. It's never going to be as fast as I want it to be, but it's there. Now we're in a position at the end of games to not only just stay in games, but also win games as well. We just got to make sure, and really focus on kind of crossing that speed bump, getting through that wall of now learning how to win games. So it's like I said, it's a progress and everything. Definitely it's there, but we are a better team now at this time than we were last year. So at the end of the day, that's the goal, as far as progressing, becoming a better program, and we're getting there.
No, I think you're doing a tremendous job, and I love what you do over there, especially, I think that's a special community, a special place to be for sure. Coach, let's talk a little bit about Friday night, against Cohen. I think it's a big win for you guys, and I don't mean just because it puts one in the win column, but it it solidifies what you preach to the kids, right? And the hard work and the stuff that they do. Sometimes as a coach, you need a win, right? For them to go, okay, coach, yeah, what you're saying is working, right? If we do this, it does result in the good things. But talk about that game. I know it was a crazy fourth quarter. Riley Jones had a big game. Hunter Lay got his first receiving touchdown after, catching 143 balls this year without one. So proud to see that. Proud to see that. But talk a little bit about Friday night and how that went for you guys.
Well, it again, like you said, as always, wins are always good. We started out great. We're up 22-0, kind of falter, going into that half. And I tell you what, you always run into, really athletic teams are always scary, because, they'll be 3rd and 15, a snap will go over somebody's head and a kid will just pick it up and just run it for 70 yards. And I tell you what, the quarterback that they had, the little number 2, he's probably the best high school football player we've seen all year. I mean, as far as speed, could still throw it, just scary all the way around. I mean, he never left the field for him. So we're up 22-0, kind of falter a little bit. We go in at the half, only up 6, and we're able to kind of regroup at halftime, and kind of get back into what we do, and then, ran into some issues at the end. Again, we're still in that area trying to win and finish off games. But, at the end of the day, our kids did a great job of kind of regrouping, kind of hanging on, and punching it through to get that win on Friday. So like I said, right now any win is good, but especially to see us, handle a little adversity and still, achieve at the end of the day what every goal for every high school football team is on Friday is to get wins. So that was always great.
Yeah. You talk about the process of winning, and we've had this conversation before, but it gets more difficult the closer you get, because you are in games in the fourth quarter, and it's going to go either way. How has that been going back to week 1 with Northlake? Because it was the same way. You find a way to win. Then you go Catholic Point Capri, same thing in the fourth quarter. You lose by a point. Covenant Christian, we give up a field goal as the time expires, and it was close. But to keep, and through all that, and you'll never say this, but you're battling injuries too. What has that process been of not just keeping the team together, but getting guys to continue to go play hard on Friday night while they're dealing with all that adversity?
Well, and that's really the key, and especially nowadays, it's tough when the results aren't what you want them to be. It's tough to keep preaching perseverance and, and keep fighting and everything like that. And obviously injuries are big for any high school team, but, I've never been to a game and they ask you who you got out and the score changes at the beginning of the game. So at the end of the result, the job is to get it done no matter who you got. There's no transfer portal in the LHSA as far as I know. So, we are who we are. We have who we have. But hats off to our assistant coaches, and not only that, but our kids as well, because it's easy to kind of shut it down when the results aren't there. At some point, I always worry that it becomes, just white noise of, keep fighting, keep working. But for us, it hasn't been. And like I said, that's kind of really goes towards our assistant coaches and above all our kids, as a way of, hey, we're going to keep fighting through this and keep grinding. Every Monday at 7:30, the same group's still out there. We're still looking to, to get it going and get back on track. So, that at the end of the day, when you have a solid locker room, I think like we have, in a solid coach's office, it makes it easier to keep everybody on board and really, not to be cliche, pulling on the same side of the rope. So,
yeah. And Coach, I tell people all the time, District 7 4A it's so good from top to bottom. Pearl River's sitting there at 2-5, and I don't want to play them. They're physical as all get out. They just run the ball downhill. And you've got another one of those matchups this week with Lakeshore and Coach Indest. We had him on earlier in the show, and Cass kind of hit the nail on the head. That team kind of takes his personality, right, and they play that tough, hard-nosed football. And they don't make it any easier with running the wing T, where they'll finesse you and then punch you in the mouth, right?
Right, without a doubt. And I tell you what, it's one of those things. It's an easy game plan week as far as exactly what you're going to get. There's going to be no tricks. There's no surprises. They're going to line up and just try to punch you in the mouth. Just enough. And as soon as they'll run it 7,000 times in a row, and then the play action happens right behind you. So, the simplicity of it, and it's one of those things, and I've known Coach for a while, just as far as at Kaplan, Catholic High, the evolution of, it's always little nuances to it, and they do an outstanding job of just what they do. You want to talk about an offense that runs, and just a team in general that runs stuff efficiently. Not only that, but also, we're going to have to teach our kids how to run a wing tee offense in 3 days to get ready for Friday. We got guys who don't even who line up, our offensive linemen don't even line up in a 3-point stance. So that might be a little trick Monday morning we got to go over for our scout team guys. But no, not only to give our defensive guys a look, but also in the way that they run it is nearly impossible. So when you couple that with what they do and how, you don't see it a lot, but then the fact that how they run it and how physical they are and just the relentless, just one after the other is really outstanding. So, it's a huge mountain for us to climb for the week. But, hopefully we can, discipline and like I said, toughness is going to be big for us this week.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Cass, what you got for Coach before we leave?
In my unbiased opinion, this is my favorite coach over here on the North Shore. That's for sure.
You just said that he still needs an 8th grade baseball coach for the spring. So,
yeah, you're still doing that too. Okay. But just we're in week 9 of the season, and there's a whole lot for. I'm gonna use the word us. There's a whole lot for us to play for. Still, so like that us. One, on, yeah, hell yeah, that's gotta be exciting. And the kids, they've been, like you mentioned it earlier, they've been awesome all year long. But like now, our playoffs start now, and we know exactly what's ahead of us. And yes, it's not going to be easy, but that part of it's got to be exciting for the program.
Without a doubt, and it's one of those things. It's we always talk about taking our program to the next level. Well, we got a good week to prove it. We say we want to do X, Y, Z, whatever it is. Well, here's your chance. And not only that, week 9, and then I know we're not, we're always a week by week thing and everything like that, but we got week 10 as well. You say you want to, we say we want to, take this program to the next level, playoffs and everything like that. Well, we got our chance right here. So it's one of those things. I think, if we can talk about it all we want, but it's laid out for us for the next 2 weeks, and especially the way the power ratings are, and, nobody's immune to checking, the power ratings, LHS like that. We're on the verge. So it's one of those things that's laid out for us, and, there's no question about it. I'm not paying the $10 a month for Go Preps anymore, but a little real time. But it's laid out for us. If we want to go what we want to do, then we've got to take care of business. So.
No, we appreciate it, Coach. And look, lastly, I'll say this: I appreciate your support of Northshore Prep and helping us out all the time, and you're always open to us. Your program is. I think if your kids are a reflection of who you are, I'll say that you and your staff have done a phenomenal job. Your group of kids are some of the best around, and they've been great to us as well. Feeding us information. It's a great group of kids. I kind of look forward to your continued success. And there's a long season left. It's week 9, but there's 7 more weeks left of football, right? So it can be a long one. So we'll be following along for sure.
I appreciate it, guys. And look, thank you for everything again. I know Coach Salter just said it. What you guys are doing, the past year and a half has been just great, and at the end of the day, it's all about getting publicity for our kids, and you guys do that to a T. Being able to, to open up Twitter, whatever it is, and seeing, all the guys that with their success, game of the week, all that kind of stuff. Thank you for everything you guys do for that.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Well, look, I'm sorry we can't keep you longer, but you're going to have to get back to those honeydews, man.
I just have to sit at my computer for another
45
minutes.
Sit there and talk to yourself for a little bit.
Right, exactly. So I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks again, Coach. Have a good Sunday.
All right, man. You too.
Man, that's a good one, man. What a great group of coaches that we've had on so far today, and we kind of started backwards and got all those coaches in, so now we can kind of get into kind of what the week's leading up to, right? I think we start in 6-5A first. I think it's a fantastic district that has been kind of the talk of the North Shore for a long time, right? But what St. Paul's is doing, and I talked a little bit about this Saturday. They had really tough preseason. John Curtis, Rummel,
Jamboree,
right? In the Jamboree, they played
U-High.
They played U-High. They played Brother Martin, right? In the game they lose to Brother Martin, they got Easton roiled. I just say that, right? Like it's not much you're going to do.
They weren't the first and won't be the last.
Nope, they will not. So they sit there in 6-2, and they host a Mandeville team who lost Ben Hendricks in week 1 after that game, and freshman Crew Calor has been kind of the talk of the town, and for good reason.
Yeah, and when you lose your starting quarterback in week 1 and you have to replace him with a freshman, no matter how talented they are, that's tough to do. And this Mandeville team, I think it's one we looked at when that happened. That hey, in week 7, 8, 9, and 10, this team's going to be much better than what they are right now, and that is exactly where they're at. And Coach Jones and that staff, they do a great job. All those guys do is win. No matter where they're at. So they're going to be competitive, and they've put themselves in a position to where now it's, you go to St. Paul's with it, not just a district title possibly on the line, but, some big major implications in the power ratings as well for a Mandeville team that, because they've gotten better and better and better, and Crew Calora has been, as advertised, but also he's experienced some growing pains, but he's now kind of seen it all. Like this team might be playing as well as they have been all year long.
Yeah, and look, I take the Hammond game last week, and it was a strange game, right? I got to watch that whole thing afterwards, and it was different. And I have to say, I give kudos to Hammond and Coach Buckles and that crew, right? And they just went to Covington. It's an 18-14 game in the fourth quarter. They have 3 turnovers in that fourth quarter that they're in plus territory.
Yep, and I think that Mandeville-Hammond game is probably more of a reflection of Hammond. And how well they have, progressed, and what Coach Buckles has done with that program. And that might be, as we sit right here, maybe the most impressive thing that's happened all year long with where that program is now and what he's done, with it. But I think that game said more about Hammond than it did Mandeville. But I'm excited about this Mandeville-St. Paul's game. Always seems to be exciting when these two play. There's always a lot on the line. So it'll be fun. It'll be a fun one.
It's a collective community for sure when those two get together.
No doubt.
And look, I have to say this about St. Paul's. defensively, they're the all-name team, right? There's a lot of guys that have come back from previous teams, and Aiden Brooks and Brett West and Gage Brown, the defensive line. They have guys everywhere. They have 2 young corners that play really well. Offensively, what Kenny Sears Jr. is doing has kind of evolved throughout the season. It was always kind of the Cody Corrales show early on, but young junior quarterback Brady Pearson, he's had 2 games now that he's put some stuff together, and they hit Brennan Villa over top. That changes the landscape of who they are.
Yeah, it does. And I think coming into the year, you know what you have in Corrales. So that's who you're going to lean on early until you kind of see what else you have and what those other pieces and how they fit. And again, like you said, we're in week 9. They figured it out.
Yeah.
And that can be a scary proposition for opponents, but it's got to make Coach Sears and that staff feel good, knowing that, okay, we have this piece in Corrales who's maybe one of the best running backs, not just in the area, maybe in the state.
Yeah.
And an offensive line that is big and physical and can get the job done. But when you add that component of being able to throw the ball over the top and get it out in space, it's going to be tough to defend.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an exciting night over there at St. Paul's. Moving to the Covington-Ponchatoula game, we talked to Coach Salter about this. We don't have to cover it a whole lot, but I think it's an intriguing matchup. Ponchatoula's sitting there at 1-7, but they're a talented football team. Coach Walters is doing a good job of kind of building that thing up. They're young, their quarterback Oquan, and I bring up Will Walker. He's sensational.
He's one of the best athletes around.
He's a grown man as a sophomore in high school. So that's going to be a bit of a fighting match, and because Covington is still really evolving on offense and who they are, I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of a punching duel here early.
No, not at all. And this is not something that you want to hear as a coach, but Ponchatoula may be the best 1-17 around. Yeah. But to your point, yes, Covington is that offense is a work in progress. And because of that, this game is going to be close. And, you can say what you want and look at Ponchatoula's record. That is a proud program, and that's speaking of communities, a proud community. And, a Friday nights over there are special. They're going to treat this one just as such. Covington has to make sure they stay focused on the task at hand and to go out and let that defense go to work. Hope they can, score some points late and kind of try to pull away from them before we can get into that Week 10 matchup with St. Paul's.
Yeah, look, we look at district standings there. Covington's – they need to win. They got to stay in it, and there's another Week 10 matchup with Covington and St. Paul's. So, that thing keeps getting better and better. Last game there, Salmon at Hammond, we can talk about this one because it'll be in the other preview as well. But, Coach Tudor and those guys get a massive win at Slidell, two what I think are pretty equal teams and what they do and how they do. I think Coach Tudor and Coach Page do such a good job with those young men, kind of mirror images. I have to say this, Dejon Howard at Salmon is going to be one of the best senior quarterbacks in the state. He's evolving, and in Coach Tudor's offense and what he does and the weapons that they have on top of Jimmy Chansey running the ball, they are hard to stop on offense, and I think they lead the whole area in points per game.
Yeah, no, this offense they've been explosive all year long. The athletes they have, it makes it difficult to slow down. I think one of the most impressive victories of the season on the North Shore is Salmon beating Lakeshore.
Yeah,
that's not one that I don't think before the season you pointed to that said that hey, Salmon's going to go win this game. But that was impressive. Obviously, doing what they did to Slidell last week was impressive. And on the flip side, from Hammond's perspective, 2 weeks ago, they lose to St. Paul's 41-12. The game kind of gets away from them. But the evolution of that program, last year, the same exact thing happened to them at St. Paul's. They started off, I think we had lost a game in week 1, went out to get to St. Paul's. They lose the game, and I don't think they won a game after that.
Yeah.
This year, it's a completely different script for them. Yes, I know they lost to Covington last week, but immediately after the St. Paul's loss, you turn around and play. Mandeville team was playing pretty good, and they found a way to win the game. So just doing that shows the growth of this program and where they're going. They have an opportunity now. They can win out to put themselves in a position to possibly host a first-round playoff game at Hammond, which is, 3 years ago you wouldn't believe it if someone told you that.
You wouldn't have said it for sure. No. And you talk to Coach Salter about this. Coach Buckles and that crew. They do a really good job, and they're keeping those guys on track. And don't be surprised if this is another good game. But those kids are ready, and they're not going to take that loss at Covington as a season ender for sure.
No, not at all.
Let's move into District 7 5A. We've covered the Salmon Hammond game a little bit. Here's another one that I think is a phenomenal matchup, and Chalmette doesn't get talked about enough, right? Chalmette sitting there at 6-2. Coach Tucker and that crew have one of the best defenses around. They've only given up 90 points all season. They did a similar thing last year. And I remember when they won, I believe it was at Hahnville in the playoffs. Everybody's like, oh man, look at these upsets that Chalmette's. If you've watched Chalmette all season, you understand that really wasn't an upset, right? Like defensively, those guys get after it.
They do. They have two of the best linebackers in the state. They're physical. They play, and I'm going to say this as a guy from the parish, they play exactly how you would expect a team from Chalmette to play. They're tough. They're physical. They get after it. They play extremely hard. That coaching staff's been there for almost 20 years now. They've maximized, I think, the opportunities they've had, and it is very similar to how they were last year. And I wonder if maybe the run last year might have had a little bit to do with maybe the slow start. Although losing to Lakeshore is nothing to sneeze at, and obviously the Holy Cross game is what it is, but maybe they just thought that it was going to happen for them again this year, and they got a wake-up call early in the season. Now they're playing extremely well. It would not shock me if they continue to make another run into the playoffs. And then for Salmon, this is a great matchup because the offensive Slidell going against the defensive Chalmette is going to be a fun one to watch.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. And, last week, Breeze Wilson, he's kind of been their main running back. Now, when they've done really well on offense, they've had 3 or 4 guys run the ball really well for them. But, Breeze was 10 carries, another 100 yards, and a touchdown. He was 13 of 54 in the air, 54 yards. If you don't know who Dana Antoine is, get on it, because he's going to make a play in the playoffs and everybody's going to know who Dana Antoine is real quickly. He's really good. Rashawn Bangham's another one that can play it at receiver. So they've got some weapons. I'm really intrigued with that. And then, look, this matchup, North Shore and Fontainebleau, I'm excited about this one because I love both coaches. I love what they do. I think they're both building programs. Coach Sanders at North Shore has proven that they're not going to be an easy out. every week, you play North Shore, you get punched. I think Ramon Williams ran for another 154 yards or something like that at Friday night against St. Paul's.
Yeah, when you look at North Shore's record, you see that they're 2-6. Obviously, they're 1-1 in district, and you kind of dismiss them. But then you go look; they beat Mandeville, they beat a talented Salmon team. One of their losses is to John Curtis, who everyone that's played John Curtis this year has lost.
Yes,
a Lakeshore team that it was a close game. They end up losing by 2 scores, and then it's almost like you know what you're going to get, but you don't know what you're going to get because they just might beat you. But no, that staff has done a great job over there. And then Fountain Blue trying to get their feet under them, trying to get things going again. And I think outside of the implications on playoffs and district standings elsewhere, this might be the most intriguing game this Friday.
It really is. And look, if you look at power rankings, North Shore's in right now, right? So they need a win. Fountain Blue can sneak back in with a win. Coach Kavanaugh does a great job. He won't say this, but they've been decimated with injuries. Quarterback, they've lost, Connor Tyson, who had to play when Askew got hurt, and he's one of the best athletes around. I'm excited about him for basketball season for sure. So hopefully he's healthy by then, right? But Logan Askew was kind of going to be the guy, and he's been hurt kind of all season. So they play Sawyer Shane at quarterback, a baseball kid who's sophomore, who is one of the best baseball players in the state for sure. So they've been injured, but it's another program that if you look at what they do and how they do it, it's growing, and you can see it. You can see how much more physical they are. They've been in the weight room. They've got some size to them, and their programs are growing. So, I think Coach Kavanaugh, he's got a ton of success coming from North Louisiana. Be patient, because that program's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and it's tough. Building a program it's not easy. It's not easy. And it's also success in doing that isn't linear, where it's a straight line, where this year we're going to win 2, next year we're going to win 4, and then, we're going to make a run in the playoffs. That's not how it works. But if you can go watch that product, not just on Friday nights, but throughout the week, how they practice, the fact that kids are still showing up, playing their tails off, then you go see it on Friday night. You want the results for those kids. It just doesn't always happen. But if you just keep showing up, putting in the work, at some point there's going to be a breakthrough, and that program's going to take off.
Yeah, no, they're definitely an exciting group to watch. We moved to District 7 4A. I tell everybody, I don't think people understand how good this district is. Lakeshore's sitting there at 7-1. They got in a fist fight with Franklinton and won that game, and that could go either way. Hannon's on a rise. Coach Chris Powell at LaRonja, he's got one of the best rushing attacks in the state in my mind. He's got 4 or 5 guys that can really run the ball, led by Rylan James. But I think this Franklinton at LaRonja game is kind of an intriguing one for me. I've been high in Franklin just because I'm so high on Coach Salt. I think it's, if it was a chemistry experiment and you wanted to add a coach to a program and say it was going to work, like it's a marriage made in heaven, right?
Yeah, no doubt. With his fire, his personality, and the want to and the commitment by that community. And that when you think of Franklin, at least when I do, you think of Demon football. Like that's what it is. Like they've been so good for so long. They kind of went through some rough patches there, and then Coach Salt turns around there in the Superdome last year. And it's he does obviously a great job. He wins everywhere he goes. And speaking of teams taking on their personality of their coach, they do just that.
No doubt.
And I think that's the sign of a really good head coach, is when your team kind of can mirror what you do. But what Coach Powell's done at LaRonja in his first year, again, with Rylan James in the backfield, and it's more than him, but that's where it starts. That they have a chance to get a big victory this week.
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, anytime you play a Franklinton, it's keep away, right? Like you can't go 3 and out. You can't turn the ball over. Those are going to be the 2 huge things that LaRonja has to focus on. The minute Jacob Crane and that crew get the ball, you've got to defend Burkhalter. You've got to defend DeMikey's McLean. Rayborn had a big game out the backfield last week. Their tight ends starting to come into play, and they're starting to throw him some stuff. Coach Matt Hughes does a phenomenal job with that offense. So, I do think Jacob Crane's one of the best quarterbacks in the state. He's, Coach Salt talks about it all the time. He's a coach on the field. It's tough when they have the ball, so I would keep it out of their hands. For sure.
No doubt. You got to, if you want to keep the ball on the ground, if you're LaRonja, but that's kind of plays into what they do anyway. And then defensively, it's easy to say as we sit here behind this table, but you need to limit the explosive plays from that offense, and that's not going to be an easy task. But if you can control the time of possession as much as you want, then I think that's going to be the best shot for the Wolves. And they get the game at home. So
Yeah.
that's also a positive.
As a defensive guy myself, I think how would I defend them? And I'd probably stay in cover 3 and give them 7 yards at a time. And then I realize that that's just 10 plays and 70
that's
yards.
it. And then you got to tackle them once they catch it.
So it's difficult, and you can't bring pressure because Jacob's going to see it. And he's going to expose you. So it's difficult. Great matchup for both those great coaches. Hannon and Lakeshore, we talked about this one a little bit. I think it's an intriguing matchup. The thing that I've been really impressed with about Hannon is there's no back down, right? And I think there were opportunities for those kids, not the coaches. You're not going to get that from them, but for some of those kids to go, it's not going that well, right? But every week they are fighting, and they've got talent. Like, don't be confused. This isn't a down Hannon team because they don't have guys. They've got some kids that can play.
They do, and it's just being on the inside of that day in and day out. I feel lucky that I've got to witness it and see it, but they don't back down. And you're right. This is especially the senior class. They've been through a lot. They have been through a lot and haven't had a lot of good results to show for it. Yeah. If there was ever a time or a place for them just to kind of mail it in, it would have happened about 2 weeks ago, and that hasn't. And it won't. I know Coach Soper won't let it happen, but it's not going to happen. And they are talented. They do have some good players. There's some good pieces coming. Braden Sprang at quarterback, finally kind of getting healthy. He was battling some injuries early on. Riley Jones at running back. You got Grayson Dupree defensively, and then Paul Hoyt kind of does it all for that team. But they're not going to back down. They're going to show up on Friday night. They're going to be prepared, and they're going to go play hard. And speaking of limiting possessions and holding the ball, that's what Lakeshore. That's what their offense lends itself to, but they're so good at it that they hit explosive plays, and they end up scoring quickly. So Hannon's going to have their hands full, but they're going to show up ready to fight on Friday night, and it's going to be fun to watch this team the last 2 weeks, because I think as it stands right now, we're right on the outside of making the playoffs. And a win in one of the last 2 weeks, I think almost all but guarantees that. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting.
I think so too. And Lakeshore, Coach Indest and that group, we talked to him earlier. They're so good. And, I'll say this, they've got, when it's 3rd and 1, just move the chains. Can we just get the first down? Because I don't want to do anything silly there, right? Because they're either running, a trap, belly, or Brody Loudermilk's running a quarterback power, and they're going to get the yards that they need.
It's hard to stop them from getting. You've got to win first down, and by win first down, you need to make it like 2nd and 30. Yes.
And I'll say this, I've got to give a lot of credit to a lot of kids. Cade Stevens runs the ball well. Dylan Cusack runs the ball well. Sean Brown runs the ball well. Oja Gross runs the ball well. They will run it with anybody. And Coach always says this: we're not going to be at the top of the stats list anywhere. Well, he's wrong a little bit, because Brody's doing his thing right now. But offensively, as a whole, nobody's more efficient than they are.
They're not, and that's what makes that offense so difficult to stop. No matter who is, at quarterback or wing or run, it's difficult to stop because of all the options. And it's not an offense that's run through one person. Yeah, it can go obviously depending on the read keys. The ball can go to any one of 4 guys on any given play. But when you have a quarterback like Brody Loudermilk, that takes the snap, it makes it really, really difficult.
Now you're 10 on 11 instead of 9 on 11.
That is correct.
It's different for sure.
Yep.
Lastly, let's touch on this Pope John Paul game real quick. I love what Coach Pygott does over there. Pearl River and that group. They got Coach Leonard, coming back out of retirement over there, and this is a really fascinating matchup in my mind, because it's 2 teams that want to run the ball. They want to be physical, and they want to run the ball hard. Right. Now I'll say that, but the quarterback Hutchinson at Pearl River, really talented athlete. I think he's dynamic with the ball in his hands, and he can throw it a little bit too. They got some weapons on the outside, but you're going to get a steady dose of Gage Duran, and you're going to get Hutchinson up the middle, and they're just going to pound you.
No, and Coach Leonard coming back into the district. Speaking of how tough this district is, that's a state championship winning coach that just drops in, into Pearl River.
I'll come back
just to go join, the rest of the district. So it is a tough. And one other note on the district: not only is it tough, but it's like physical. Oh yeah, like all of these teams want to be physical. They're big and they're strong. So that on itself, that's kind of what Pearl River is going to want to do. But this game, kind of on Pope's side, reminds me of a few weeks ago when they played North Lake Christian. Both teams want to do the same thing. It's going to look different, but they want to do the same thing. So who can impose their will on the other one? And, you're right. Coach Pikett's done a great job at Pope John Paul, and it's going to be fun to follow those guys the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think he actually just passed up his former head coach, and now he's a second all-time most wins at Pope John Paul, which is really impressive. They're young. I say young running back. He's a senior now, but
they're all young.
Smith.
That's how I look at it. They're all young.
He's great. Yeah, they're all young men at this point.
They're all
right?
high school.
But they do really well. They've got some juniors on that team that are going to be really good to follow too. Let's move into district. We got that one wrong here. Let's go to district. Let's see if we got that. Let's go to 9-2A. I'll upload that here. Let's talk about that group as a whole, and I think this is another one that is a really, really good district that can kind of make some noise in the playoffs. Let's see. Let me remove these. I think that's what it is. There we go. We talked a little bit about the Pope game with Pearl River, but Pope John Paul is going to make a run in the playoffs. They're going to be just fine. STA and Independence, two programs that are kind of building themselves. Coach Sam Messina, who was at Laranja, give him some time at Independence. They're going to be just fine. He's going to put
it won't be long.
It won't be long. And then the Northlake Christian St. Helena matchup is a fantastic matchup. And the reason I think that is St. Helena, what they do offensively, they will spread you out. They throw the ball as far down the field as they can. Somebody's going to go get it. It'll be a bad snap, like Coach Soper talked about. It'll be a bad snap and some kids running 70 on you, right? Like it's crazy. And then Northlake Christian runs a very controlled offense. They want to run the ball well. They want Cam Casnave in the game. Give me your feel on this one a little bit.
I think it's going to be whoever is able to dictate the tempo of the game. If you're Northlake, you not necessarily slow the game down, but you're going to want to put everything in a box, and you want to let Casnave go. And if St. Helena has trouble slowing them down, it's going to be a long night for them. But on the flip side, St. Helena is so athletic. So, there's athlete at all the skill positions that, like you mentioned, at any point can get their hands on a football and take it to the house. That's a scary proposition as a defense. And if you look at this St. Helena schedule, week one, they lose to Jules Sumner, who hasn't lost yet. They lose to Kentwood, they lose to A-Meet, and they lose to Laranja. So, yes, they come in there 3-4 overall, but those losses are, if there's such thing as an impressive loss, they've got it. And they're battle tested. And, the fact that they have this one at home is going to be a little more difficult. But Northlake Christian they're physical, they're big, they're going to run it right at you. They're going to try to impose your will on you. And if they can do that, especially early in the game, they maybe, kind of run away with it and control the game the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Northlake Christian. Obviously, I get up front center look at it, right? But defensively, they have been dynamic over the last 4 weeks. They have outscored their opponents 161-7. They have 3 shutouts in a row. I don't care who you play. Shutouts are hard to get.
It's tough against air.
Yes, and I think the difference there is they've started to play really well up front and in the middle because they've got athletes. When I say they've got athletes, they've got some guys who are next level guys.
That is correct.
Friday night was a big night. Like I said, Coach Boomer Nunez and that group, they're kind of building that program. Northlake's up 51-0 at halftime, right? Cam Casnave has 8 carries, 111 yards, 3 touchdowns. Jordan Willis has 4 carries, 111 yards, and a touchdown. He also had a 25-yard interception return for a touchdown. Charlie Gilmore has 2 catches for 31 yards and returns a punt for 65 yards for a touchdown. They block a punt and return it for a touchdown. It was dynamic. And I have to mention quarterback Sam Grant. He's kind of coming into his own. I think they're trusting him a little bit more to throw the ball. And when Willis and Gilmore are running down the field,
that could be the key, too. If you open up that pass, and it doesn't have to be, we don't have to reincarnate what Drew Brees did with the Saints, but if it can be just enough to keep the defense on their heels a little bit, then all that's going to do is open up that running game for those guys too.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a fascinating one. Lastly, we have our last district here, which we started covering in my mind a little bit too late. I'm disappointed I didn't get on them early, but I wanted to make sure we could cover them well, right? But District 8-3A, oh my goodness.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Joel Sumner, Coach Greer over there, he's been there a while. I think I said it on the show yesterday. They're now 18-2 over the last 2 seasons. They lose by 2 points in the quarterfinal last year. Would have set up a really neat matchup with Dunham. They're once again getting after it. They got a big win over Pine last week that wasn't really close, and I think Pine's a really good football team. I'm not going to discredit this Albany game, and I don't want to move forward on coach's behalf, but
There's something coming in week 10.
Jules Sumner in a meet in week 10 is, if you can get there, get there early,
Yep.
right? Bring some food, have your beverage, and go enjoy one of the best football games around.
No, well, what Jules Sumner's done, now almost 2 full seasons, maybe the quietest 18-2 over the last 2 seasons in the state. They might be the quietest 8-0 team in the state. And I don't mean quiet by it's not been impressive, but just people aren't, kind of getting to the party a little bit late here. So we're not the only ones that happened to. But
right.
This, it's super impressive that what they've done, and just in this district alone, when you look at Pine is a good football team, and a meet is a meet like that. Nothing.
It's a meet, man.
They may be a little bit down from what they were maybe a year or two ago, but it's still a meet. But this is a big one for Albany going to Jules Sumner. Coach Michael in his first full season as the head coach for the Hornets. He's got his guys there at 3-5, 1-2. It's a big game for them too, so they're going to be ready to go. So Jules Sumner needs to stay focused on this one, but yes, week 10 could be exciting.
And look, I have to say this about Coach Michael in Albany: they've improved so much already. Like, they're scoring points, they're doing really well. I thought the game would be closer against a meet, and I think that's more on a meet and who they are as a program. But Albany's getting there, and they're going to be just fine. Preview this Springfield a meet game. This is not a knock on Springfield, but if a meet just goes and does what they do, they're going to be fine and going into week 10. Franklin Morgan Jr., Louisiana Tech commit. If the ball's in the air, he's probably going to go get it, right? And if you're kicking, do not kick to him.
No,
that's a bad idea. Their young running back, he's a sophomore, Jamyron Dillon. He's going to run for 4,000 yards in his career, probably, right? And it might be more. I might be underestimating, what he does. But they're fantastic. They have a really good quarterback who runs that system really well. They're physical up front, so this is a good matchup for me.
It is. And you look at their 2 losses. It was in week 1 and week 2 to a Franklinton team who we think very highly of, and a Hammond team who's not just improved, but is a really good football team this year. So that, the losses aren't anything to be ashamed about, although I'm sure in a meet, there's a standard of excellence that's a little bit higher than that. But the last 6 weeks, man, they've just rolled. And they've kind of feel like they're starting to get into this time of year. Kind of feels like it's a meets time of year. And again, if they show up and they're able to take care of the football on Friday night, that should set up a huge matchup with Jules Sumner.
Look, it's going to be Halloween.
There's all, and you're dealing with 15, 16, 17-year-old kids.
That's great. And then the last matchup, Pine at Bogalusa. Pine does such a good job of running that program, and we got to jamboree those guys this year. And Coach Willis talks about how good those guys are, right, all the time, and they run another really good program year in and year out. They're phenomenal. They go to Bogalusa. Bogalusa has kind of been the punching bag for everybody, but they got a big win last week against Springfield.
They did.
And look, Bogalusa's got a coach that he's got skins on the wall. Right?
A couple, not just one.
He's got lots of skins on the wall.
Yes.
So if you remember those days, he's going to be fine. He's low in numbers, but they're going to be fine. But that's not a good matchup on Friday.
It is, and Bogalusa is going to be coming to this game. Like I said, he got a big win last week over Springfield. So those kids, you would think are going to have a little bit of confidence that they're not going to go winless. So I don't think Coach Crutchfield is going to let them do anything different other than go play hard on Friday night. And then if you Pine, again, just show up, take care of the football. Kind of get back on the right track and get yourself rolling to go on a run in the playoffs, because that program is really good.
Yeah, no, it is. Look, before we wrap this up, huge thank you to Game Day Cuts here in Madisonville. Get out to Madisonville. It's a phenomenal place. They've got a great staff. I get my head cut here, and he always talks about how good I look. So that is correct. It's not a me thing. I can promise you that. But the girls here do a phenomenal job. You get everything that you would want, full wash and dry and all that other stuff. I've actually got an appointment scheduled for a head massage. I didn't know they did that, but
get it all.
That's next week, so we'll be doing that that next week as well. But appreciate owner Brad Rishu and that group, for letting us come in here and do this show. This is something that we'll try to do every week here and keep the North Shore updated.
Yeah, no, this was fun. This is a great. Just looking around all the sports memorabilia. You got the high school teams. They got Michael Jordan's Duncan back there on the wall. This is a great place. and this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we starting to do this. So hopefully y'all enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, and look, as we move into the next few weeks, what I'm really excited about is football is king. We always talk about football is king, but we're about to start some soccer coverage. We've got girls and boys basketball, which I think deserve that as well.
Yep.
So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but really excited. I think the kids in the community, the coaches, the schools, they all deserve it. I think this area has really been spotlighted well, and we want to continue to improve that. So, Players of the Week, our sponsorships are a huge help.
Yep.
We've been able to bring on some beat writers to do some stories for us. We've been able to bring some photographers on to get some really good stuff for kids. And then we're about to start our internship program as well. So we'll have some high school students who are interested in this kind of work to help us out as well. So excited about it.
No, there's a lot of really good stuff that goes on this in this area. And the coach in me is going to thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
And the fact that I get to help and be a part of this is exciting for what we've got coming down the pike. But yeah, football drives everything. I don't think that's a secret, and that's kind of how it should be. So we're going to spotlight them, but no, that's going to lead into some really cool stuff that's happening here shortly.
Yeah, no, we're excited. So for myself, Mike McMillan, Northshore Prep Report, Cass Hargis, thank you for joining
Absolutely.
us. Once again, thank you to Brad Rishu and Game Day Cuts for having us. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter. We're now on TikTok and a YouTube channel, so the kids love TikTok. I didn't realize that was going to be a thing, but it's absolutely exploded. So that's fun. Well, we appreciate you joining us. Join us next week and stay tuned to the content. We'll have some more Coaches Corners coming up where we do some one-on-one coaches. Thanks again.